Hi guys, welcome back to Crash Course Literature. I'm Felix, one of your hosts, and today we are going to be talking about Blindness by Jose Saramago. Saramago was born in Azinhaga, Galega, Portugal in 1922. He and his family moved to Lisbon in 1924, where his father worked as a police officer. He worked several jobs unrelated to writing, but maintained an admiration for literature. Later in his life, he found careers related to writing, such as production manager for a publishing company. He published his first work in 1947 and continued writing until his death in 2010. He wrote Blindness in 1955. At this time, Portugal was under the control of the Estado Novo, or New State, a dictatorship that came to power in 1933. This serves as a potential explanation for Saramago's criticism of government in this novel. Blindness is a fictional novel that takes place primarily in an abandoned asylum and the city outside of it. The novel is also not set in a specific time period or place to create ambiguity in the setting. Blindness follows the lives of multiple characters as they suffer through a mysterious epidemic of white blindness. None of these characters are ever named. They are instead referred to by descriptive characteristics such as the girl with dark glasses or the old man with the eye patch. The novel begins when a man suddenly goes blind at a traffic stop and follows the societal breakdown which comes as this blindness spreads. The government attempts to control the situation by placing those infected in an abandoned asylum, where the characters have to fight for control over the limited resources they have. The story follows an optometrist and his wife as they navigate the quarantine. However, the doctor's wife has a secret. She can still see. She guides the characters during their time at the asylum and when they eventually escape into the city. By the time they escape, the blindness has plagued the entire city, leaving it in complete disarray. Blind wanderers crawl in groups through the dirty streets, scrounging for scraps of food wherever they can find it. Thanks to the perseverance and teamwork of the characters, and the compassion and selflessness of the doctor's wife, they find safety until the epidemic is miraculously lifted. The novel ends with the uncertainty of how society will reform after the hardship it has faced.
One theme seen throughout the text is survival. One example of this is how, within the ward, the characters have to live without guidance and adjust to this new lifestyle. Another example of a theme within Blindness is teamwork. When living outside the ward, the characters link together to be able to guide themselves throughout the city. They don't lose one another and they don't get lost. Another example of teamwork is the gang of thugs using power and numbers to guard the food. Another theme within Blindness is gender roles. Women are seen as property of the men in the story. Many of the women in the story are referred to as the wife of. For example, the first blind man's wife is called the wife of the first blind man throughout the story, and the wife of the doctor is referred to as the doctor's wife throughout the story. Women are also seen as a form of currency, and the gang of thieves that collectivizes the food forces people to give up their women in order to acquire that food. Another example of gender roles are how women are portrayed as gentler or kinder throughout the story. Another theme is blindness, not only blindness in the physical sense that the characters suffer from, but blindness in a more metaphorical sense. As the doctor's wife put it, I don't think we did go blind, I think we are blind. Blind but seeing. Blind people who can see but do not see. Another theme within Blindness is authority/government. The government in Blindness forces people into quarantine and outlines certain rules that they have to follow for living inside the wards. Inside the asylum, the wards each have different authorities that they listen to and are guided by. Outside of the wards, when they finally leave and enter the town, the wife is seen as an authority figure for the group, and she leads them.
The author Jose Saramago uses a variety of authorial choices, and the most obvious one for the readers to tell throughout the book is the use of punctuation, creating very unique and long sentences without much periods. Punctuation is used throughout the book, highlighting the chaos of the society of the blind people, as well as the inconvenience of being blind and being around so many other blind people. A specific example is to not have quotation marks when it comes to dialogues. On page 180 to 181, a dialogue between the doctor's wife, the main female protagonist, and the man that rapes her did not have any quotation marks or anything that splits the dialogue apart from other narration parts. This allows the readers to understand how confusing it would be to be blind and to have other people talk to you, helping the readers to understand what the blind people felt in the asylum. Imagery is another very important authorial choice that Saramago uses in his work Blindness. On page 3 of the book, the first blind man describes this blindness as if I were caught in a mist or had fallen into a milky sea. But blindness isn't like that, said the other fellow. They say that blindness is black. Well, I see everything white. This helps the readers to understand what the blindness is exactly. And similarly, imagery is also used later in the book on page 133 to depict the nasty asylum that the blind people were assembled in, helping the readers to understand the difficult environment that the blind people were in. Another example of characterization of character, which demonstrates human nature, is that although at the beginning of the book, the car thief seems annoying by harassing the girl with the dark glasses and stealing the car, however, before he dies, he apologizes sincerely, and which shows that human nature is very complex. Scissors is a very important authorial choice that Saramago used as well. So in the book, there were two sharp tools mentioned, that the scissors in chapter 10 and also the heels of the girl with dark glasses shoes, which she used to injure the car thief. Both of those sharp tools can be seen as a symbol of feminism as well as female rage and female self-protection, which is very important, linking back to the theme of gender roles. Another symbol seen in the book is the eyes. Of course, eyes symbolizes blindness, but here we're talking about not a Gloucester type of blindness, but a King Lear type of blindness. The eyes were mentioned in page 316 and 317, that the protagonists went into a church and the statues in the church had white cloths tied around their heads and their eyes covered. This shows the helplessness of people regarding blindness, that people are in the society were accepting the fact that the entire society is blind and almost fallen into chaos and immorality brought by blindness willingly. This also creates contrasts as people gain their visions after the society had fallen and the city was very nasty already.
We're gonna put the introductions of the authorial choice into real simple paper 2 questions. We're gonna provide 2 paper 2 questions that both can use blindness and another text that we've learned in the 5th and 6th years. Compare the role of violence in at least 2 works studied in class, and we're gonna use blindness with the Handmaid's Tale, which they have pretty similar themes, and they have pretty similar that they also have like personal and governmental structure that utilizes violence and rigid rules to like manipulate people, especially like the blind infected people. And then their similarities, like they both show the role of violence in maintaining their power in the social structure, while the differences is like the Handmaid's Tale play more of a part in governmental control over people. It creates distrust among especially women, and then like the maids, who leads to like violence action between the women, and then like reinforce the control as they distrust people. Well, like the blindness, more of a way show like the confrontation between personal organization and between the blind people and the government. The restriction of the government builds up into tension and anxiety that leads to the conflict of sources and further violence and stuff. For Handmaid's Tale, I'm gonna give 2 examples from both chapters. Like one is from chapter 8, where 3 men were hanged because they confronted the general rules of Gilead, that their homosexuality and stuff. That does not obey like like women are born to get fertilities, stuff like that. So it's like an example of violence, that Gilead use violence to force people obey their rules. And chapter 42, like the execution of the maid from other women, like it shows like the self-restriction between like the same gender, like the women stay on the gender norms, but it's from both Gilead and personal, that the person is influenced by Gilead. In blindness, there are also there's 3 examples. Like first in chapter 5, there's like a list of rigid rules in the words when the blind person first come in. Like it showed like the governmental violence to control the blind people. And following the chapter 6 shows like the soldiers fire warning gunshots to the blind people. First it was more like a verbal violence, and the second was more like a actual violence. And in chapter 20, like the sexual violence and intimidation of food and resources to the blind people in the words. That's more like an example from personal organization, like a group of thugs and stuff.
One example of a question that could be asked on a paper 2 is compare the ways in which at least 2 works you have studied portray individual weakness. If I were to write my own paper 2 on this question, I would choose, in addition to Blindness, to use the play Ash Girl. Both Blindness and Ash Girl have many similar themes, but use different authorial choices to portray their characters' individual weaknesses. For example, one similarity between the two texts is the struggle the main characters face with sadness. Ash Girl, the main character of Ash Girl, struggles with sadness in her family life and her ability to make her own choices and connect with others, whereas in Blindness, the main character, the ophthalmologist's wife, she struggles with sadness in being the only person who is able to see in a world full of blind people and having everyone rely on her for directions in the world. Another similarity between the texts is the character struggles with the 7 deadly sins. In Ash Girl, the 7 deadly sins are directly translated into characters which try to take control of other characters and corrupt their actions, whereas in Blindness, they are more implied. For example, envy and greed are shown where the characters try to take food in the asylum and get whatever they need to survive, whereas pride is shown in the government's actions towards the blind people, where the government thinks that they are better than the people in the society. And obviously lust is very present in Blindness as the gang members try to take advantage of women for their own pleasure. If I was to write my own paper 2 on these similarities, the authorial choices I would focus heavily on would be stage directions in Ash Girl and imagery in Blindness, because both of these authorial choices help portray the settings, and oftentimes the characters' surroundings are directly related to how they're feeling inside and struggling.